Welcome to the next episode of Flintco Talks. It's your boy Dano. I'm here in St. Louis again today. I've got the chairman and chairman emeritus in the seat. I've got John Alberici and Greg Kozicz sitting down with us this morning. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So as we get started, we talked last night. There's so many different topics we could cover. This might be the first of several conversations we have, but John, I want to start with you, and I want to think about a trip down memory lane and think about the company kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s when Greg was joining, and really kind of take us through that process and getting Greg on board and kind of what your goals were for him up in Canada.
Well, it was a great find when we got Greg to come on board in Canada, and he knew so much about Canada. We had learned things over the years, but it was great to have somebody with that local knowledge and somebody who could lead the group up there, and he certainly had the background and the skills to do that. We had run into some management problems here in St. Louis, and I think that we had a whole level of senior people who were not really in the right places, not really in a position to do the company the good that they needed to. So it was incumbent on us to find that leadership that we seemed to be falling out of being able to execute. And we knew that Greg was up in Canada and he was very well qualified for what he was doing there. Would he want to make the trip down to the U.S. and take over some things for us here? And he agreed to do that. And we pretty much cleared out the people who were in the wrong positions or the wrong responsibilities. And that was the beginning of a whole new attitude about succession planning, talent acquisition, how we looked at the people who were going to be key to the company's success in the future. And I think with his leadership, we fit right into that.
Yeah, so what was interesting about the thinking process that John was going through was I was still a relatively new construction executive. I was testing some of my own kind of frameworks. And I'm going to use the expression small L, like to be a small L leader of an organization. I had learned some things at my old company, which has become Acon today, but prior to that it was a different word. And I had been a president there for a little over a year before it had been acquired, and I ended up at ACL. And when I came to St. Louis, and it wasn't 100% what the conversation was going to be, but it was about seeing if there was a role for the type of leadership that I was providing at ACL, which I wasn't 100% comfortable. Was the word you would use today is scalable. A bit of an overused word, but here I am. I had run $150 million a year multi-trade contractor at a different parent company. ACL was 100 to 150. I think in the last year I was there was trending not up but down. And when John spoke with me about the opportunity, the only sliver of, there's a range, on a ruler of the sliver of confidence that I had was I had started to really understand kind of the power of, the right people at the right spot at the right time. And that seemed to be really stabilizing and launching what we were doing in Canada. For everything else, I had no idea if it was scalable. Sort of at the time, I think we were doing about 850 million. And I remember flying back on the plane. And I think I said, in fairness to John and Bob McCool at the time, I know the things that we're doing at ACL are working. We're incrementally improving. but I was not confident, that they were scalable, and I was not confident that I was scalable. I just didn't know. So I was pretty nervous about the opportunity.
And it seems like over time it was extremely successful, right? What determined kind of that success when you think about being scalable and you think about several years later when you came, I guess, ACI here for United States work, what was the differentiator? How did we find that success?
Well, I think one of the things that Greg added immediately was more discipline to the hiring process and how we promoted people, looking at how we were structured so that we utilized everybody in the best fashion. And we had to, literally replace that middle management group. And Greg found the key people who could do that and found ways to get through to them how important it was. And so that collaboration was really the key to making it all work.
Yeah, and what's interesting is because, speaking with John at the time and trying to understand, I think we sometimes use the word diagnosis, like what's the diagnosis for how we've gotten away from? And John said it's pretty fundamental. We've grown a lot, and that's not a bad thing, but it is a bad thing if you've not kept your basic sort of execution rigor in place. And that's about people and efficient policies and procedures, not just a bunch of policies and procedures to have them. And so his comment to me was, we've drifted from, being able to forecast schedule completion dates. We've drifted from, kind of understanding quantities, productivity, and therefore forecasting. And so I think it would have taken me longer to really understand how the big red machine had kind of lost its way a little bit had John not had that insight, which goes a little bit really to the background when you think about the role, because he, for the longest time, had more than just one hat, chairman plus the senior VP on the administrative side. So he had the cost group and all those sorts of things. So he had a lot of insight that was really helpful. I think the other thing that's worth noting sort of at this time was that whole Collins view of the right people on the right seat on the bus. And if you're not on the right seat, maybe there's another seat. What I find interesting is in the first 12 or 13 months, and things like, if you've lost your way a bit, they don't change overnight. But getting John's guidance on what to focus on meant that we weren't spending 3 or 4 years figuring it out. We had 9 market leaders at the time. Within 12 months, we changed 8 of the 9.
Oh, wow.
Of those 8, 7 were in the company. This wasn't a question of, going and saying, oh, we don't have good people here, that sort of thing. It was really a question of making sure the focus, like if your focus is on, flawless execution, is on like a commitment to excellence, and John mentioned the word discipline, it was making sure that you had people at the top of markets, market leaders and so on, that modeled that behavior every day.
Yeah.
Well, they were easy to find. They were throughout the organization, and there had just been a little bit of steering, kind of in maybe chasing a little bit of volume and that sort of thing. And when you're doing that, the type of people that are rising to the top are not, it's not either or all the time, but if you make the mistake of really seeing people rise to the top who are in the, in the pursuit and kill and the satisfaction ends there, you can end up with a lack of focus on execution and discipline. And we really just reversed that. Once those behaviors started to be modeled, it was really the beginning of careful work acquisition, careful work execution, the administration of contracts, the signing of contracts where we would say, actually, no. I realize this is a $200 million opportunity for us, but we're not signing up for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing about John was, he'd say, that's okay. There was a saying we all, he wouldn't have seen necessarily every day because, but there was a saying that he had at the time, Greg, don't worry. You grow broke faster with bad work than with no work. So if this is not a contract that looks balanced to us, or it's an owner that appears unfair to us, it's okay to say no. And sending that message and giving the management team the comfort, it was okay. If that made us become a $500 million profitable company instead of a $1 billion less profitable or unprofitable company, that's okay.
As a leader in the company at that time, how did that make you feel that John was able to empower you to say, hey, it's okay to say no?
Oh, completely. And then you started to, I was a relatively new leader and then a new leader in St. Louis. And what you started to realize right away is that, one, John's expectation for you was to think. How did he, I don't think it was a test, but how did he ensure you were thinking? Well, he asked questions. And to this day, John is a really, really gifted questioner.
Sure.
Person who asks questions.
Questioner. We'll call it the questioner. Yeah.
Sure. Well,
I almost said executioner, but I thought I said.
Well, that might be a different style.
Yeah.
That goes back to just going to school. The person who had all of the authority was the teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and the students were all subservient. But when you think about it, what the teacher did was ask questions, and the students were supposed to come up with the answers. And so if you wanted to take that high role in the company, what you did was you found the right questions to ask and then find out from that collaboration what other people thought about it and how they reacted so you could make a good decision. But it seemed like it was all collaborative, not something that just came down from the highest level.
It was interesting because so it was the art of the questioning and then the art of not judging, the answer, or I have a better answer. There was always another layer of questions. And it helped create a preciseness in the thinking about things. And John, through this process of interacting, it wasn't just with me. I mean, we're a very partner. You look at all our conference rooms. There's lots of chairs in them because we participate together in this. Some person once called it kind of a Socratic approach to things. I think that's too fancy a word for it, but at different layers,
Mm-hmm.
without judgment, and John's the tempo of when we could be patient in pursuing something and where there was a greater sense of urgency, and that sort of both strategic and tactical approach to big business issues, but also small ones. And what we started to learn as the management team, so funny. We'd be at other places within the building and we'd get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
We would get stuck on something,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd say, let's go see John.
Uh-huh.
Now, we wouldn't always bring like 12 people down the hallway, but certainly Greg Hesser and I would say, John, do you have a minute?
Uh-huh.
And we would go, I don't know if I can put, but we would go to a room that was very close to his office here and in this conference room, and we'd say, here's what we're wrestling with. John would want to know how we'd been thinking about it. And not in a formal, like I said, judgmental way, but he wanted to know if there was any thinking we were missing that he would then start asking questions about, or if he could take another look at it. And the guidance that came from those sessions that then re-energized, refocused, powerful, examples. And I'd be happy to but whenever you want me to talk about an example, I'll be happy to talk about some really, company life changing.
Yeah, I'd love an example. I'd love to, Greg, hear your side of the story, and then John, kind of as you heard the Gregs kind of presenting you the thought, and then the questions maybe you asked before we got there. If you have one, let's hear it.
I think the classic example might relate to the Flintco acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And
which I'm grateful for, by the way. Thank you.
Well,
we're grateful for that too.
Yeah. When we started the Flintco process, and there was a little bit of background as to how FMI, introduced the company to us, and it happened, at least superficially in the beginning, to fit an interest in our part to be in geographies where they were less susceptible to major economic downturns. Because post 2008, we were very, very lucky as a company. We were in Detroit, St. Louis, Atlanta, and those markets got just clobbered. We tried to bid elsewhere, but we're, sort of less successful not having local relationship then. As you know, if you don't know the local labor or local subcontractor, it's very tough. So Flintco got introduced to us by FMI. We went through the due diligence process. We appreciate it / recognize right out of the gate that Flintco was a really, really unique company, very similar to Alberici in the sense that a sort of dedication to operational excellence and that sort of thing. It wasn't, when you think about Alberici as kind of a heavy civil, heavy industrial with a small buildings and healthcare group, this was a big buildings and healthcare group, and it was going to fundamentally change the company. But we always had this vision that maybe we could take our heavy markets and overlay them in the geographies where Flintco was. And that was kind of the picture. But we were struggling prior to having done some of the people reviews and stuff to see whether or not it was really going to be a fit. There was California that we weren't certain about operationally. New Mexico was not quite Arizona. And so we were pausing a little bit, and it was coming to a time where we had to make a decision. And Greg and I looked at each other, and gosh, we ride bicycles, we ride them a lot. So we would be hours on these different bike rides, like, yes, no.
Yeah.
And so we said, just like, it was like one of those times where we walk down the hall and we say, we need some help from John. We're missing something. Well, John wasn't here. He was in Florida in a car. He pulled over to the side of the road, and we said, John, here's what we're experiencing. We described, some operational difficulties, but we had done the people reviews. And I said, you know what, John? The sad thing is, because it was a no, the sad thing is, if I were to go through a process and say, I would love to buy the Memphis office, and if we were to do a headhunting search, the person running Memphis would win. We would hire them in a minute. And we went through every office, and Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and we went through all the offices saying we would buy Texas, we would buy these pieces. But Flintco's got California, it's got New Mexico, and there was a lot of humming and hawing, and John just said, well, why don't you just do that? Like, do what? Why don't you just make an offer for the things that you want?
Wow.
We'd not thought of that. We weren't doing M&A activity we hadn't thought about that. We said, it's you buy Flintco or you don't buy Flintco. And it was one of those, I don't know, I think you were at the Craft Mart or something with Natalie waiting in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And it's just like, think about, I don't know how many words that is. That's 9 words that altered, too dramatic to say, the course of history of Alberici, but it was, why don't you just buy what you want? And we hung up the phone and we did one of these things, we said, let's call, I don't know if it was at that point, I think we were speaking directly with John from the Flint family office.
Okay.
And let's call him and say that, we don't know if this would be acceptable. He said back to us, maybe it's because John and John are like, two on the same. He said back to us, he said, I was wondering if that's what you might come back with. We're very interested. He said, I'd
Really?
like to convince you, to take on Albuquerque and New Mexico and that sort of thing, which we did in the end. And we're really happy that we did.
Mm-hmm.
In the way I process it was John listening, he would have had way more questions had we not already been well-trained in asking questions ourselves. But he found there was a question that we hadn't asked.
John, from your perspective, how was that conversation?
Well, it's easy to get into a fixed position where you know what your goal is, but you don't know how to get there. And sometimes it just takes a word to someone looking at it with new eyes that says, well, take a different approach. Can we do something here? Because the fit was great. I mean, we had been looking probably for a decade
Oh, wow.
of a non-union operation so that it would complement the union work that we were doing. We wanted a company that geographically would expand what we were doing into areas where a union contractor didn't have a lot of chances, all through the South and the Southwest. So when we located this opportunity with Flintco, this was something that fit. It was hand in glove to what we were looking for. It provided people who were running the operation already. And when you think about what Mr. Flint and the Flint family had added, it was so similar to our own experience. And actually, you were there 10 years before we were as a company. And we thought, no, they've got all the history. They've got the ethics that we want, or the ethos,
Sure.
as you describe it. And just looking at that, it was so similar to our background, but it fit all the areas where we wanted that expansion to go. So it was hard to give that up when we thought it's so good a fit that we shouldn't pass this up. So we looked for that alternate way of approaching it. And with the Flint family, they were very eager, I think, to put that company, which meant so much to them. That was their family enterprise. That's how they got their own footing in so many industries, but it was the basis for that. They wanted that to go to a good home. If you have a child you're going to put up for adoption, you want
Sure.
them to go to the very best place to be cared for people who really know how much that means. And I think we may or may not have made the best offer, but we presented them with a company that really cared about the acquisition, and that was something that we didn't want to give up. Well, how can you do that and take everything? Well, maybe break it into segments, maybe break it apart, and put the puzzles back the way it should be.
Yeah, I think back to those conversations that were on our side. It was a surprise to us that the Flint family was going to sell. I actually found out from my father-in-law, who worked for Turner Industries down on the coast. I was there at Christmas, and he was like, "Hey, did you know your company's for sale?" And I was like, "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" And it was 2 months later, and the email comes out. There's this period of 60 days where Alberici's going to come and look, and come to find out there'd been multiple suitors. And I remember Matt Grieshaber came to my job, and we sat down. And the job I was managing, mind you, this was 2012, 2013, coming out of the recession. I was on like a $5 million job. We spent like 3.5 hours going through, walking the job, going through the risk analysis, the change orders, outstanding change orders, where we are on completion, where we are on schedule. And I remember thinking, man, these guys are pretty in depth. Like, this is only a $5 million job. But in the end, I realized that it was what we've talked about not, sweating the small stuff, like making sure that even on the $5 million job, we're doing a bang up job, and we're taking care of the customer, we're taking care of our trade partners, and we're going to finish on time and make the fee that was stated. So reflecting on that now, I understand, and super grateful for that time to meet Matt and understand and walk him through what we were building.
Well, everybody that was on that transition team took responsibility for really analyzing the projects and the project people, because in the end, it is that interaction that is going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember, and this goes back to Peter, because he was there when I went down to Tulsa to talk with the people after the acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
There was tension in the room,
Mm-hmm.
understandably,
Sure.
because if you have a company that's new to Flintco, what is the purpose? What is the intent on this?
Mm-hmm.
And that tension permeated the lunch that we had down in the warehouse building next to the offices in Tulsa. And it came time for questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first question that came up was the elephant in the room that everybody was thinking. And the person said, "Why did you buy us?"
Mm-hmm.
Kind of took me aback. And I said, "That's not a word that we've ever used.
Mm-hmm.
We think we're investing in you and the work that you do." And you could just tell the tension left the room.
Mm-hmm.
They were much more open because they understood that we weren't there to take advantage. We were there to create advantage
Mm-hmm.
for everyone. And so it really changed some minds. But frankly, Alberici didn't come into that with a star record of acquisitions.
Uh-huh.
We had made some acquisitions in the 80s and 90s. None of them worked very well. And you'd think, well, that is awful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like Edison, 99 times he created a light bulb that didn't work.
That's right.
And someone once asked him, were you disappointed with that? Oh, no, he said, we weren't disappointed. In fact, we found 99 ways of not making a light bulb. And this was something that was a learning experience.
Sure.
We took it the same way. We hadn't been successful, but we started analyzing why. What had we done wrong? What should we have done better? And what we really lacked in some of the other attempts at acquisitions is not understanding the culture of the company that we were acquiring. We really had an advantage with Flintco because it was a built-in culture that they had, which, as I said, was so similar to our own that we didn't need to encourage the companies to come together. Their purpose was already similar, so they just melded very well. We had tried to strategize between Greg and myself. How are we going to integrate these companies? How are we going to get people to work together? And the first time that I knew that, Matt Graysaber and other people were going down to these projects, I said, "You've already been there? You've worked with them? Oh, man, they've got this and they've got that, and we can help them do this and do that." And we thought, let's step back and just let it happen, because it was part of the process that they were eager to do, both from Flintco and Alberici, to get together and do what they saw now was an advantage for both companies.
I remember very specifically, let's not have, the people with the C in front of their name, CEO, chairman, let's not mess it up, because there was this organic, there was this organic interest driven, for example, you mentioned Matt, he headed up the kind of the operational due diligence. He had a team, but Matt was, a very steady, intricately detailed project person, quiet, thoughtful.
Oh, yeah.
And for him to come back and say, this company really gets it.
Mm-hmm.
For him to be excited that really, I think, said a lot to us, is that, if you can convince Matt Grieshaber that you're operationally
sound,
you get the check of approval.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to kind of transition that into the philosophy of leadership, because John, it seems like you bring something to the leadership table that helps people get out of the fixed mindset, helps people see more of the growth side. Where would you say your leadership was developed, or maybe if you want to talk a little bit about your philosophies on leadership?
Well, my background was business management, so I started with that as an advantage. But when you really try to pull it apart, there's no one way of doing management.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, I thought it was better to find out how people wanted to be managed and then do it their way. I was adaptable, and I think that we really formed a good philosophy through that. The company had gotten into silos. There
Sure.
were the people in the field who had their work to do. There were people on the inside that really supported them, but they weren't working together as well as it could be. And because of that, we started to change those mindsets. Why are we both here?
Mm-hmm.
The service side wasn't there to service themselves. They were there to service the projects. The projects were fine. You didn't get people paid. You didn't get subcontractors paid. You didn't get all of that done without these other people from the office. So there was an interdependence. And we relied on the people to make those silos disappear so that you really valued not just the field and not just this or that. Now, the field is where the profit comes from. That's where all of the volume comes from. But unless you have the support group really fixed on making that successful, it's not going to work as well as it should. It can work, but not to the best extent.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it comes back to a conversation we had last night talking about stewardship and talking about being a good steward of your part of the company. And I think that's something, Greg has specifically said, something that you instill in the people that work here. And why is stewardship important to you?
Well, it's the future, because we're here for a time and we can make a difference while we're here. But you want to, as the Boy Scouts used to say, you leave the woodpile higher for the next campers. And we wanted to create something that was not only of value to us and the goals that we had, but really sets the stage for success in the future for those people who were motivated to be a part of it and to go on with the next generation of the company.
It's interesting on the fanaticism around people and the notion of stewardship. If you live it every day, it's really meaningful. But if you don't live it every day, it may not resonate, in exactly the same way. And once you've been here long enough, it's just second nature. But I want you to think about this. The fanaticism around the hiring process as a way of sort of ensuring, kind of cultural integrity and how easy it then makes it to grow future stewards. So think about this. You go through, I mentioned earlier, for 10 years, even with my CEO hat on, which I don't, we run the business much more as a partnership, but someone gets called the CEO. So even with my CEO hat on, for 10 straight years, I sat in on every intern interview. I want you to think about this. I mentioned that, we would never hire an intern that couldn't pass our test, because if they couldn't pass our test, then they couldn't be an employee. And so why would you waste an intern spot? So if that person comes in and are with us from right out of college, and they're with us for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, along the way, they become hirers. They themselves, whether they become a project director or market leader or a VP of construction, they're involved in the hiring process of another 22-year-old.
Right.
And how long does that 22-year-old stay in the business? And so if you're sitting sort of at a certain stage in the business, you've hired someone out of college who is hiring someone out of college.
Right.
So your responsibility is 60 years, right? Just do the math I just gave you.
Yeah.
It's 60 years of responsibility. If you get it right, the company will be celebrating its 170th year in business.
Sure.
And if you're not fanatical about it, it won't be.
100%. I think that all reflects back to manage people the way they want to be managed. Because having taken the CMA before and reading about myself, right, a lot of the things I knew, maybe some of the things I didn't want to admit, but as new people join the team and you get to read their CMA, you understand what makes them tick. You understand how they can be a good member of the team and how they want to be managed. And as a leader in the company, it makes it a lot easier to interact with them when they start. You know, you get that report, they show up at the job, and it's kind of like, I know exactly how to talk to this person to be able to help them be successful, to help us be successful. So fanatical is the best way to describe that, because as people take the CMA, we tell them it's like, this is several hours. And it's not that it's hard. It's just that you want to be focused on it. You want to answer truthfully. And, you know, if it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, there's still other great places for you to work. Like maybe it's just not right here. And that's, I love the thought of the 60 years also, right? It's a guy that has recruited at Texas A&M for the last 20 years. There's a handful of folks in the Austin office which have been handpicked by me and the other folks that I recruit with. And I'm reflecting back, and I feel like we've made some good decisions. I feel like the next 60 years at Flintco Austin is going to be in good shape with some of the folks we have. But that's as a career fair is coming up, and I'm going to step out of that role. That's exactly what I'm going to tell these guys that are stepping into it.
It's 2 generations. You know, when you sort of do the math on the rubber hitting the road, it's 2 generations that you can influence. And imagine if you get that right, that last person that comes in could impact 2 more generations. Now you're starting to talk, and you get back into this notion of the living company and that sort of thing. You're starting to talk about a company. If you keep getting that right, oh my goodness, the economy is going to change 700 times.
Yeah.
In, you know, whether it's 30, 60, 90, or 120 years, we're just going to change all the time. What we do is going to change all the time. But with the right people, with the growth of a steward, you know, a class of stewards throughout the organization, you know, there's hundreds of years to go.
Oh yeah, at least hundreds.
And I think having a family company, it goes with the Flints as well. You think about the longevity of the entire organization. It's not going to die out. People are born into it. People die out. But corporations can continue. And it's replenishing its ranks with these new hires. It's like going into a marriage. You want the best qualities of the people that you're bringing into the family. And that's a responsibility of the family to make sure that you aren't bringing in the wrong people so that you have that longevity. And you can look out and say, well, the next generation and the next generation, because that's what we're built on. That's the way it looks to us. Not just year to year. Are we making a profit this quarter? Are we going to go the next 30 days? That's very short-term thinking. And when corporations get into that short-term thinking, they may maximize what they're doing this quarter. But that doesn't mean that they're really making the best decisions for a company that's going to stay the course for how many years? There's no limit.
Yeah, none at all.
So that is something that is different. And when we looked at it as a living company, that's what you look at. You look at what is the long-term prospect for what you've put together. It is an organization made up of living organisms, the people that are the backbone to the company, having a similar purpose and working together to make sure that it works for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a powerful message. And when we give it to the interns coming in, they kind of say, well, I never knew this kind of company still existed.
Right.
You know, maybe in the past, or maybe that's the way it was some other time.
Yeah.
But that's not the way corporations work. But I think that my stewardship was to move the company from being a family company to a corporation without losing the feel of how families work together and make it work for everyone in the family.
That's the legacy. That's the John legacy then.
Well, John legacy, this is my time
Sure.
to be here
Yeah.
and to make a difference.
Sure.
And I think that is something that, and I don't mean to get historical on this.
It's okay.
My mother named me, but it happened to be for my grandfather, that named me John after John the Baptist.
Okay.
And it didn't dawn on me till much later that she really understood that I wasn't going to be the savior of the company. Luckily, we have Greg for that. I was going to be the one to transition to the savior. I was the one to identify the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And, biblically, it worked out for the people involved. And I think that it's working out for our company. But did my mother know that was it? No, except she was very clear that I wasn't named after any other saint named John. It was John the Baptist, and there was a reason for that.
Oh.
And I didn't know the reason till much later, but I think that she understood that it would be a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the example of how it worked.
The voice crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way, right?
Yeah, without losing your head this time.
Literally without using your head. And Greg, as John alludes to you, is the guy that helps transition from the family-owned company to the corporation and not losing the family values. Like, what's the challenge there for you?
It's not a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get the basic tenets, building an organization that's stuffed with people that are smart, humble, disciplined team players, it doesn't mean that every day's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I say, those are things you can't control. The one thing you can control is your dedication to getting the people side of the business right. So in that respect, it's impossible to be perfect. It's impossible to have a perfect track record to get every single people decision right. But if you're not committed to excellence in the people process, it's just dumb luck.
Mm-hmm.
Dumb luck, you end up, I know all sorts of companies that have no commitment whatsoever. They'll hire 200 interns for the summer and they'll keep 20, they'll toss the rest, and gosh, they can have some great years.
Mm-hmm.
Those are usually the companies that hire FMI to call us after they've run their course of one generation. A guy said, like, hey, I've built this great company and would you like to buy it now?
Yeah.
And you know what? In most cases, we have no interest.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have no interest? Not because it's not a great business, the person's done a great business, it's because they've not hired stewards in the business. And right away, it's just so easy to tell. And so in that sense, my personal difficulty was getting it because I did come from a public company.
Sure.
And I'm not saying like once I got it, the light came on or something, but I realized that I didn't have to look at outside examples. Like you think about, sports teams. And the reason why that's the sort of, whether it's Dallas Cowboys, the New England Patriots, the Montreal Canadiens, you talk about dynasties and you look at what they measure their success in championships. That's not realistic to sort of think about winning the championship for 600 straight years. Like it's just not realistic.
Right.
What is realistic is behaving and operating in a certain way for 600 straight years, 500, whatever number you want to choose. And once you get that, you realize that it's a commitment to excellence as it relates to building the thriving culture, a culture of stewardship, and that the key to that is in the recruitment, hiring, training, all of the support systems, the way you manage. John talked about managing people the way they want to be managed. And when you get that right, that part of it becomes easy. The other part of being in the business, that's hard every day.
Sure.
Oh, I've got no hair left, turn on gray. That's hard every day. But you've got the satisfaction of your own personal commitment to excellence in building the very best teams. And I can walk around, we're at headquarters today, I can walk around headquarters and I can see interns that I interviewed as CEO. And for every one of them I see, a story comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I look and I say, that's a steward. That's a steward. They're going to steward this legacy, in their own way, their own fashion. They're going to have their own daily challenges. But I have 100% confidence that when they start being instrumental in hiring, they're going to look at it exactly the same way that John taught me and our folks to look at it.
I love that you're telling that story, John. I can tell you're pleased with Greg and pleased at what he's talking about and where he's going. I want you to talk a little bit about the friendship that y'all have created over the last 24 years and what it's like to think as Greg carrying on the great Alberici name.
I think there is an element of trust that we've developed, and it is something that goes well beyond just saying, you're supposed to do this, and, well, okay, they do it, and, that's great. So how do you teach that? That's a good question, and we had a question early on with Calorelli and Myers because they were trying to find what is the blueprint of what makes a good successor and how do you hire.
Calorelli and Myers, that's CMA.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that or not, but
Yeah.
CMA comes from.
So I knew Mr. Calorelli, so I knew. I mean, I go back a little CMA.
Yeah.
Okay, they're corporate now. But they analyzed what made Alberici leaders successful. What are the traits that you look for? And then how do you ensure that those are the traits that we leave with the company when it's our time to pass it on? And I think that they did a really good job of doing that. And when I look at Greg and others who are in leadership positions, they exemplify what we were looking for in all the cases of the hiring. And the question came down to me one time, how do you develop trust? You trust people. That's how you develop trust. How do you teach values? How do you teach motivation? And the answer was easy. You don't. And you don't even try. What you do is you hire motivated people. You hire people with the values that fit with the company. And after that, you don't have to do anything except stand back and let them do their work to the very best of their ability. Our job after that is to clear obstacles so they can keep doing it and doing it even better than we had an opportunity to do it, because here's somebody who's running interference for us. The runner always looks good when that defender gets tackled, and
Absolutely.
they can run right up the field.
Yeah.
So that's the example. And I'm sure hockey is the same way, but in deference to the Canadians.
Yeah.
But I think that you don't teach that kind of fundamental attribute, but rather you hire for it. And once you get all those people with the values, with the culture ingrained, you don't have to look for how we're going to continue this in that next generation. They're going to take care of that themselves. I think it's really difficult to have a person who comes in and they say, well, I'm not sure this is really a good fit. Well, that's an indication that there is no fit. If they're not coming in really feeling like this is the place for them, how the company, it would just be awful to go to work every day for a company that didn't have the values that I'm looking for. I can work, I can earn a pay, but you don't feel good about what you're doing, and you probably don't stay there very long. What we enable is for people who have those attributes, have those values, know they're motivated and that they're going to be able to do their best to keep doing it even better. And that is our role, but it's also what we hire for, so that there's no interference in getting that done.
And so, Dan, if you think about that, so just sort of listen through that. It's still hard every day, but operationalizing a bunch of people that really feel like they belong here, like it's unfair to say it's easy, but that part becomes the easy part. And what's interesting when John said, you don't have to worry about it sort of as going to the future, because what ends up happening is those people enjoy success in terms of the meaningfulness of their time at Alberici. And, and I don't want to overly segue here, but, when we were talking about the work-life balance, this really speaks to that work-life balance. Work-life balance is a very tough thing if where you go to work doesn't fit properly. But 100%. If where you work is how you like to live, there isn't work. Now I'm really this is a pure ripoff of conversation John and I had 3 weeks ago. And I just thought more about it. It isn't work and life if you live your life through work in terms of the values that you just are as a person. There isn't a day, night, there isn't that. And so what we hope we've done is we've stuffed the organization filled with people who don't feel they're making a trade-off between life versus work. They're here because they can live who they are in the work that they do, with the only role for John or me having taken away barriers. And often a barrier would be something as interesting as simple as someone, again, maintaining the culture and the stewardship and so on, would like to be in the renewables business or whatever it is. So the barrier we're removing is actually making the investment and making certain that the company has the resources, both capital and people resources, to allow people. We've spoken in an earlier section, John, about buying the Bricks Company and Midwest Foundation, and doing so in a way that allowed people who were interested and passionate and could live, not the work-life balance, but could live that, by being able to have those opportunities. We're really investing in opportunities that allow people to grow in a way that allows them to live a genuine life that's about the values that we screened for at the beginning.
I see it as a transition away from the transactional construction job, right? That you just show up for 40 hours and you collect your check and you go home and you don't care about anybody you work with. You care about getting your hours and you care about yourself staying safe and leaving. And that's the work-life balance that's hard if you're in a transactional relationship with your employer.
What we finally came up with was, instead of a work-life balance, a work-life integration, so that you don't feel like you have to sacrifice your life to do your work. And your work supports the life that you want to live, whether it's in your family, whether it is in your hobbies, whatever that might be. We think that we provide a basis for that employee to make the most of what they want and not see work as a burden, but something that helps them to be themselves. When interns say, well, what can I do to really fit in the company? And my answer is usually, be yourself. Bring yourself to work and to really exemplify what you want out of your life, but do it through the work that will give you a good paycheck at the end of the week, but it doesn't get in the way. It is the enabler for everything else you want to do. If you have dreams, if you have all of this ahead of you, just be yourself and bring that into the work. We can try to hire for things, but if the employee doesn't bring that skill into the company, then we haven't really accomplished as much as we want. For Greg coming down, he had a great background, he had a great education, and we wanted to make use of that. But we had Leroy's and we had other people. We didn't have Greg. And if he hadn't brought himself into the company, we would have been the worse off for it. It would have been a detriment to the company instead of the great benefit that it became.
And so, Dan, when you think about that, and you think about how the company, gosh, in 20 years, like in 20 years, you know, if you're just looking at the scorecard, you know, we were 20 years ago, we were doing $800 to $1 billion worth of business. We sort of floated around 500 to $1 billion of backlog. We started being pretty traditionally steady in terms of making money. And today, you know, it's a very good market and all the rest of it, but it's more than 4 or less, you know, 4.5, whatever the number is. And because lots of big numbers now. So there's been, you know, a 400% growth or 4 times growth. None of that, like it's interesting when you take the philosophy that John sort of imbued in the organization. None of that growth was ever written down on let's be a number, let's be a this, let's be a that. Those are so irrelevant. That top line number. Where the pressure comes from when you're going through your process of recruiting and you're getting people who are going to show up and be themselves and don't have to think about work-life balance, because at work they're living themselves. Yeah. The pressure comes to make sure you have enough spots for all of those people. Yeah. So you have to grow. You know, I mentioned Leonard Masonry. I mentioned you have to grow so that you have a never-ending supply of opportunities for the people to grow. And that's what drives growth. And if that comes with $2 billion or $5 billion, we really don't care. I mean, we've never been meant to say, you know, all we care about is that we're generating enough opportunities where people can go home, you know, to their kids, to their wife, to their partner, to their family, whatever it is, mom and dad, and say, you won't believe what I get to do now.
Mm-hmm.
The company just did this, and I'm being asked to do this. And it's a lifelong dream of mine to do X, Y, Z.
Sure.
So that's where, where the philosophy comes from is, and I refer to this like stuffing the organization filled with, at some point it's so stuffed, you have to keep growing it.
Right.
And that's the only imperative for growth, is to make certain that culture that John described thrives, survives.
Yeah. And so with that comes a succession planning, right? And let's talk just a little bit about that. Providing the opportunity, right? That's the challenge now, is making sure the opportunity is there so folks can move up. Folks love to work here. They want to continue to work here, and they want to move up, right? I mean, I think it's the natural want, natural progression. How has that changed over the last several years when you think about talent acquisition and really having a good succession plan to keep people motivated and interested in continuing to work here?
Well, I think that the people who are here bring a lot of talents, but the limitation is sometimes we don't recognize how much talent they have and how it could be harnessed and used in a different direction. And sometimes we've asked people to really change how they're working and what they're doing, because we recognize something that they have in their background, something that they have innately, that would really lend itself to this other part of the business. And people have asked me, you've spent 50 some years in the same company. Now that might be unusual to people who are taught that they're supposed to stair step to other companies to have different opportunities. And they say, well, how did you stay in the same company for 50 years? But the answer is easy. It's not the same company. We've changed. We were in highway work originally, back when I joined the company. 10 years after I joined the company, we didn't have a highway project. That was a big change, but it left all the people who had skills to do other things. And that was growth for them. It was growth for the company, and it put it on a very good footing. So you have to understand that growth is not what we're after. Profit is not exactly what we're after, but a combination that really provides the opportunities for people to grow even more, to mature as a company. And you pick up life lessons from what you hear. I'll take you way back. My father once said that when he was just starting the company again, he thought, if I could just do $1 million worth of work, everything would just open up. I mean, we'd have opportunities if we could just do $1 million, because we were small.
Sure.
Small. He got to do $1 million worth of work in a year. And they made a fair amount of profit on that, fair profit. And so he said, I'm going to do $2 million the next year, and we'll earn twice as much. He said, we did twice as much work. We earned half as much as we did the year before. And we looked at it and we said, what's the rationale behind growth if it doesn't support profit, if it doesn't support opportunities? What is the purpose? So growth was not at the base of what we did, but it was the opportunity that it provided, the stability of the company that it provided for the employees. And I think they've picked up on it. It's wonderful that that kind of life lesson, as simple and easy as it is, has guided us for years. So when Greg says, well, we don't focus on this part, it's what you don't focus on that sometimes makes the most impression for the people that we rely on. And a company is the cadre of people who make it up. It's not just a set thing in stone that is inviolate. No, it's a living thing because we have new people coming in, and if it's up to us, the opportunities are worth even more than the profit. But don't tell anybody that we don't. It's that. Let me go back. Another life lesson I think that we have here is about profit. Certainly that is a great part of the company, and we've been successful in a lot of ways, and we're very thankful for it. But it hasn't been the main motivator. It is something that we need. Think of your own person, your own body.
Mm-hmm.
Profit is like the bloodstream. It nourishes everything in the company, and it keeps you alive. And that is really important. But if someone said, is your bloodstream your purpose? No. No, it's necessary. And that's what profit is to us, and that's what that longevity is all about. You have to have the profit in order to provide the opportunities. But it's those opportunities that really create the purpose of what we do. And I think that people understand that very much in the company. They understand that profit is necessary, but it is not the purpose. Profit is something that enables us to go on generation after generation, that gives us stability. It gives us the opportunity to invest in new things, whether it's Flintco, whether it is a new opportunity someplace, whether it is equipment that will help us do our job. Mm-hmm. So all of that works together, but you have to almost separate that from the purpose of what we're here for. And that's where you get into opportunities for people, utilizing them to the best of their ability. And once we do that, the future is assured.
The nice thing about, formal succession planning, and I think it's probably not a great analogy, but when you look at a depth chart
mm-hmm.
of some sort of sports organization, sure. That's what succession planning is. And the reason why the depth chart analogy is not great is because, the Dallas Cowboys don't go start another team.
Mm-hmm.
But in our case, by having a methodology to track talent and readiness, what it signals to the company is, do we have the ability to take on a growth initiative that we can be 100% certain that from the get-go, the culture, like it will be indistinguishable from the rest of the organization. So succession planning, yes, it helps you keep track of, possible candidates for existing roles. That's pretty straightforward. So, mm-hmm. But the real benefit of succession planning is the detailed insight it gives you. Like, I'm always looking at that and saying, hey, you know what? The team that's just underneath this group, it's actually ready to be this group. Mm-hmm. But this group, that man or woman, they're 40.
Yeah.
So it's, unless there's a major mistake, it's like, so you say to yourself, well, that's, what's the pressure then, Dan? If we've got a group that's ready to go, that's culturally just a powerful group,
mm-hmm.
what do you have to do? You have to grow.
Find growth for them.
You have to find growth so that they can live their kind of meaningful,
mm-hmm.
Life. And so that's where the pressure always is. And that's the one that sort of, if I just feel it personally, if I ever lost somebody
mm-hmm.
that went to a better opportunity, that's on us. If we can't provide that opportunity, it's good luck and good on you, because you're getting to live your life, and I couldn't provide that.
Yeah.
So the pressure, having done all this work to create this incredible organization, stuff with all of these phenomenal people, is not to lose them because you can't create an opportunity.
I agree, 100%. This has been a great opportunity. This has been wonderful. I hate to stop, but I think we're at time at this point. It sounds like we're going to have another one at some point. We'll have to get y'all back together because I have a couple more questions I want to go through. But
we'll get like a tribute band.
There you go.
And we won't have to be the band itself.
That's
we
right.
won't have to come up with the new music.
That's
we'll
right.
just play the old music.
Play the oldies. Yeah. Well, it's been great having y'all on today. Thank you for the insights, for the leadership, and for really what y'all do to create a wonderful place to work. So, John, Greg, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
You bet.
Such a long